Welcome to another edition of Time for Forgiveness, the show that not only teaches you how to forgive, but also gives you compelling guests who share their stories on how they found the path to forgiveness. Now, please welcome your hosts. Here are Kelly and Bob Pascuzzi.
So great to have you with us. Another exciting episode of Time for Forgiveness. And our guests are what make this show pop all around the world. Bob, and why don't you go ahead and introduce our next guest today?
It's an honor to have a good friend, Jamie Cord, come on today on Time for Forgiveness. And Jamie, welcome, and thank you for being here with us today on Time for Forgiveness.
It's a pleasure and an honor. Thanks for the invite. Appreciate it.
Right. So, Jamie, I'm going to go right into, you and I met not too long ago. A mutual friend invited us both to a father-son retreat, getaway weekend, and we happened to be in very close proximity. We were sharing side-by-side rooms, and so Jamie and I got a chance to talk and get to know each other. I think even though it was only 3 or 4 days, I felt like after we were leaving, I'd known you for years. So I just appreciated the opportunity to get acquainted. And now, here we are on the show, and I asked Jamie to join us, and for our audience, I asked Jamie to come on and share a little bit about his journey with his son over the last few years, Aiden, and then more importantly, what happened on that weekend, Jamie. And I think maybe we could just pick it up, and maybe you could give a little backdrop. And again, I just want to thank you for your heart and your willingness to share and be open and vulnerable, because that is a heart-led leader, and we talked about that over the weekend at Tommy's event. But if you wouldn't mind just kind of sharing as much as you feel comfortable sharing about your situation that's kind of unfolded with Aiden over the last few years, and maybe a little bit then more importantly about what transpired on that weekend.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And I'll tell you, God puts us in places on purpose, I think, and works in mysterious ways. And I needed that weekend. And it was great to meet you, Bobby, and all the other guys that were there. But it was an incredibly special experience with my son, Aiden. And I probably should do the same thing with my eldest son, Mason, and my stepson, Gael, because of the impact I had with Aiden. I want to have that again. And I don't need to wait for a father-son retreat. It needs to happen now. But just to give you a little background, I met Tommy Spalding about 8 years ago at a business retreat and fell in love with his heart and his message, and decided that I was going to lead from the heart and be on purpose building a culture where people wanted to enjoy working and feel like family. And I walk around and literally tell people I love them, because I do, and I respect them. And the communication I have with them is much more than a boss and an employee. And I was learning through that, though, that I wasn't as vulnerable or as actively loving on my kids as I should have been. And I'll tell you the reason. I was married to Aiden's mom for 20 years, and 6 or 7 years ago, we decided to separate and get divorced. And very shortly after that, there was a feeling from both of my natural-born sons that I basically did what was right for me and didn't think about their mom, which I think is a natural thing for a kid to think. But, it was not a bad thing for either my ex-wife or myself. It was not a great thing for the kids. There was not a lot of communication with the kids as to the reasons why, and there could have been a difference in the way that whole time of our lives happened. And for about 2 years, I had a very challenging relationship with my son Mason and my son Aiden. And I don't want to say that they felt this, but I think they believed that their mom was somewhat of a victim in a situation that only impacted their father and their dad positively. And we had some challenges. And what happened in the Bahamas was I was willing and able to just open my heart and be honest with my son and share with him that I'm in a much happier place in my life now, that I am in love with my wife today, who is obviously Aiden's stepmother, and that I want to be a part of his life and I want to be intentional. And Bobby had given about a 30-minute overture of the Time for Forgiveness initiative, and it just caused me to act in the moment. And Bobby, you'll remember I almost stopped you while you were talking and said, "Can I do this right now?"
Right. No, I specifically remember it. Yes.
And I might get emotional right now, guys, but it was just such a meaningful moment that I had to. And I said straight across the table in front of about 10 guys, "Aiden, I love you. I'm sorry. I know this wasn't about you. It was about me, but I need you to forgive me. And right now I'm asking for your forgiveness." And what happened was a beautiful moment. It was amazing. He started the waterfalls, stood up out of his chair and came around and put his arms around me and just held me for like probably 3 minutes. And I kissed him on the cheek. He kissed me back on the cheek and he said, "Dad, I love you and I forgive you." And that was only 3 weeks ago, Bobby, maybe 4 weeks ago.
Right.
Every single day since, and this is different, guys, and you obviously aren't living it, but every single day since, Aiden has called me or texted me or come and seen me in person to spend time with me. And
Wow.
that is a major change in the relationship. And it just proves your point. I'm sure that if you release, you let go, and you ask for forgiveness, God will help you change the relationship and it'll be better. You just need to accept and understand what you're asking for forgiveness for and be willing to make a change. And that's what I did with my kid. And it's been crazy impactful and beautiful and amazing. And I'm glad you were there for it, Bobby, because I think you saw something that was pretty special.
Oh, it touched my heart, and I couldn't. I think it was the first thing I told Kelly when I got back from the weekend, Jamie, is just your story, and I just fell in love with you and Aiden, and when I left there that day, I just was so grateful for just you and your son and what I witnessed. I mean, it was a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
one of the words that just is echoing right now in my mind is you said act. We've said this on this show before, that forgiveness isn't something you just talk about, it's something you do. But you did have to act. And would you account being in that environment? Like, why were you willing in that moment to get vulnerable? Because I think it's easy, especially I'm not trying to speak for you guys, but for a guy like to kind of look like I've got this all figured out and I've got my stuff all together. It takes a lot of courage, I think, to get vulnerable and to be willing to say, I don't have it all together and things aren't really awesome in this area and I'm going to act right now with no hesitation.
Well, that's a tough question, and I'll try to explain it. I've, for years, thought that I could earn the respect of my family, my boys, by being a successful business owner and having the material things and being able to supply them with what they need to make them smile. And it's really not about that at all. And what I learned, I guess, right there in the moment when Bobby was talking about forgiveness, was that I wasn't focusing on what was really important, and it was more of being vulnerable and showing my son that I'm just his dad. I'm not a business owner with 1,000 employees or whatever, I'm his dad. And I needed to take advantage of the fact that he doesn't care about what car I drive or what suit I'm wearing or whatever. And probably a lot of people don't. And it was more important to me to just be in the moment of love and understand that's what we needed together to get past 3-4 years of a challenge that if I would have done this a while ago, it might have been different, but I was probably stubborn or didn't even realize it was an issue until I was kind of slapped in the face by Bobby's message.
Yeah. And if you don't mind, for the folks that are, just learning about your story, Jamie, how old is your son?
19. He actually just turned 20 2 weeks ago.
So a 19, 20-year-old, young man who's been through some very formidable years as a teenager, growing up and watching you go through the struggles and his mother go through the struggles. I get that, the pushback that us dads get, because you're right. We try to stay proud. We try to stay like we have it all together when inside we really don't. And, they rebel a little bit. And I think that's what it was. And it sounds to me like those walls needed to come down. And not only did they come down, when Bob told me the story, they came crashing down at that moment.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I think what the very first thing is accepting or understanding what the walls are and how are you going to get through them. I said it 3 times. I think I didn't realize that I really needed to ask for forgiveness, and my actions were impacting a lot on him more than I was really willing to accept. So as I was listening to Bobby talk about it, I was thinking, you know what? I need to ask for forgiveness. And you're right. The walls just went away, and it's been pretty amazing.
Well, I actually can feel it. Like this is still resonating with you in a really big way. It's not where you go to that event and you're like, I'm going to make a change, and then you go back to the exact habits that you did before. Like it really feels very different in a very genuine way for you.
Yeah, it's definitely this is definitely a genuine, honest thing, and it's going to be forever. It's like I started with, I need to do the exact same thing with my oldest son because it was so impactful with Aiden. My oldest son's 24. He's been an adult since I was remarried. Aiden, of course, was 17 years old, or just almost 17 when I got remarried, and that's tough for a teenager in high school that doesn't understand everything as much as an adult would, like my oldest son.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But Jamie, I there's so many benefits to you coming on and sharing your story because this father-son dynamic is there's so many elements to it, and you've got a story with your sons, but every father, and Sean, you kind of alluded to this too, every father has a story with their son. And there probably isn't any father out there, I believe, that needs to forgive something or ask for forgiveness from their sons. I know I did it that weekend, Jamie, too, with RJ. And he did it back with me. And so this whole thing in our relationship too, Jamie, I totally relate. I mean, I felt like RJ and I had a good relationship when we went into that weekend, but when we left, I mean, the whole thing was just totally transformed for the better. And I think the biggest element with that, Jamie, as you alluded to, is just the willingness to first recognize what do I need to ask for forgiveness for. And then, but that's the awareness, right?
Sure.
Jamie, like you said, sometimes the ego and all these things that men deal with, we're not even aware that here's where we really are. But then when the walls come down, then it's like, oh, this is something I need to act on now. And Sean, you talked about this with your own sons.
Yeah, and I have 2 boys myself, and one who is outgoing just like his dad, and the communication lines are open, and the other one is going through a divorce. It's not easy for kids, and he's with his mom, and we need to go through. Hearing your story is inspiring me, Jamie, to want to immediately pick up the phone and call.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Well, I'm going to come back to you, Sean, because I can tell from a mother's perspective, I've seen such a change in my son. RJ loves in such a deep, deep way, but it was in such a protected way. And he just seems lighter and happier, and just even the willingness for the physical expression, of love. It's phenomenal. And I think he's been able as well, even beyond just the father-son relationship, just to have a different perspective in life about what can I be grateful for. And I have so much to be thankful for. And I have seen such a change in him. And I think it's partly when we let go of all this crap, should I say.
Yeah.
There's a lightness. There is a lightness to life.
Oh, it's about claiming your freedom as well.
Let me expand on that a little bit, Kelly, because my situation is definitely not unique in any way. There's probably 60% of the world that could do exactly what I did and ask for forgiveness because of a divorce. I mean, that's unfortunately more common than not, right? What I think I've learned, though, is, the old saying, the truth will set you free. If you just acknowledge what you need to ask for forgiveness for and deal with it and go to that person, you're going to feel better right away. And it's going to change the dynamic, the culture, the future. And so after that experience in the Bahamas with my son, I've actually been I've been doing some deep thought about, what else do I have in my life right now that if I were just to address it, head on and ask for forgiveness or say I'm sorry or whatever it might be, how would that impact my life? And I've been purposeful about that. And it's just it's a really good releasing feeling of, intentionally trying to ask for forgiveness and making things better.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Because Jamie, what we talk about is that forgiveness is really for ourselves, right? It's what we do. It's a thing that we engage in for ourselves, and it's the freedom that it provides the individual. But Jamie, also, when you think of Aiden, what's the biggest change that you've experienced with him since this weekend? What have you noticed about Aiden in general?
Where do I start?
Yeah.
Well, he's a typical teenager. He likes to stay out late and be on Snapchat and sleep in the morning. And, you kind of wonder what he's doing or whatever, just like everybody's kids. But I've noticed that he's been intentionally getting up earlier. He's been going to work like for 8-9 hours a day. He's been responding to text messages or whatever almost immediately, where it used to take hours or days. And I'm not saying people need to respond, but when I text my kids, I'd love to hear back from him. And now he's responding quickly. And then he has been engaging in other relationships in a different way, a much more mature way, almost like the light switch flipped that he's now going to be an adult.
Wow.
And I don't know how to describe that. It's just like you have to see it to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
But he works in my company as a software specialist, and he has been engaging with our COO and our SVP of business development. He's been asking, how can I help you? And he's been really developing relationships. And this has only been 3 or 4 weeks, but it's been really cool because one of my top sales guys came in and he said, Jamie, I've known Aiden for several years, and he's worked with me on several projects, and he's never been very motivated or dedicated, but something's happened recently, and it's been really fun to work with him in the last few weeks.
That's amazing.
And I didn't even tell him about this experience. He just came in and said, used to be a challenge, and now it's awesome. So I'm like, go Aiden, So,
I think we need to pause on that and just this one act that father-sons engaged in, and look what's transpired since then, Jamie. This is,
yeah, and whether it's father-son or mother-daughter, because I can't tell you how many people I know, and whenever I bring up something with a child, how many people have told me, because we talk about forgiveness a lot, even when we're not in the studio. I mean, people are reaching out. We very recently had a big event where people came to all of us and said, we really love that you guys talk about forgiveness and the subject matter that you bring up. So, Jamie, this is so important for parents that I'm surprised how many children and parents, when the children become young adults and leave the house, and if they have an issue, they don't speak to each other. And I'm not talking about for a month or 2 or 6. Yeah. I'm talking about for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to say, don't forget the mother-son relationship, because I am a mother of 3 boys, and it's interesting. My oldest and I were talking not too long ago, and he's been really working on himself in some areas because he's crafting a new profession. And he said, I became aware of some things just when I look back on my childhood. And he had mentioned something, and I just immediately was like, wow, I'm sorry for that. And he's like, that's not even why I'm saying this. It's just learning about myself. And I said, no, I guess what I'm saying is sometimes I think we're not used to someone asking for it, so we don't even know how to go to give it.
Sure.
We just then discount and say, I don't need you to say that, but we want to. And it's like starting to practice that so people can say it, but also be able to receive it. I guess is what I'm commenting.
Yeah.
So, Sean, there was a theme while we were in the Bahamas that wasn't on purpose, but it was a comment that I want to do life with you. Mm-hmm. And Tommy was making statements about how he had challenges with his parents that he never really addressed, and therefore they are no longer doing life together, and that he wanted to be different with his kids so that his kids at one point when they come home from college or whatever are going to want to buy a house down the street and be close and do life together. And one of the things I was thinking about was, how do I have that relationship with my family, all of my kids, where they're going to intentionally want to spend time with me when I'm not just their dad, like when they're 25, 30 years old, are they going to call me and say, Dad, let's go golfing on Saturday?
Yeah.
That's what I want. And so I think we all need to understand, how do we address things and build relationships and not put conflicts under a rug? Let's go after them, make life exciting so that we want to spend time together.
I love that. My oldest son is coming up on a marriage. He's getting married to his fiance, and he and I have been communicating so much about that day and what, I have the speech that I have to give, and it's going to be very interesting to stand up in front of all these people that I haven't seen for years, because everybody lives across the country and in different states. But to be, I have no qualms or issues. I'm going to use that, and I hope you don't mind this, Jamie. I love that you said, I want to live life with you. Mm-hmm. And you're, wow, why am I so emotional? Your beautiful new wife. What a wonderful thing to say to a new couple who are your children. And now you have a daughter-in-law. That's going to be amazing. I'm looking forward to that. So.
I think that's part of the challenge right there, is earning the respect, the love, the care from an outsider like a daughter-in-law, where that person wants to do life with you and gives permission to her husband to also want to do life with you. I've seen that in my brother's lives and even my current life, that sometimes it's challenging to do life with in-laws, if that makes sense. And we need to be purposeful about that.
Well, I love that, Jamie. It's a purposeful, intentional, and you're a very intentional individual. And I just love you to death. I appreciate your heart. And, the thing about this relationship with our kids is there's no owner's manual or guide, right, when they come in to our life. And we try to navigate this the best we can. But I think it's so important. And there's an inflection. I think of this as like an inflection point, or things that don't happen by chance. Jamie, I bet you didn't feel like, oh, that was a random event that, I went to Tommy's event and we met who we met, and that you were there with Aiden at that point in time and what transpired. I think there are opportunities that God, whatever you want to call it, it comes into our life, but we have to take advantage of that opportunity. And Kelly, you mentioned this, a decision to act. And you had the courage to step out and act in front of everybody that day. And I just really appreciate you for being able to do that.
Okay, but I love what Jamie said earlier too, was that earning the relationship. And when you're earning a relationship, you are very intentional and you do act. But when we just expect it, that's when we get lazy and we just do what we've seen, and it's maybe not really beneficial for the relationship. So I that's kind of echoing in my mind right now, is just, it's earning, but it's through intention. And I make a lot better decisions, through intention.
I think parents will agree that relationships with your children as they get older are difficult. And it's a matter of responding or acting. And to hear what you did, to stand up in front of all those people, something touched your heart and said, I need to do this now. Like you said, you almost interrupted Bob to speak, say, I need this in my life. It's on my heart. And I'm so glad that you did that, because maybe you've given the courage to other people that say, you know what, I want to make that call. I want to be involved. I want to live life with you. I want to be free of this burden. And you mentioned freedom earlier, because it is a sense of freedom once you knock those walls down.
There's so many people that could do this, and I don't want to take any credit for starting anything, but I'm going to tell you, if you do it, it'll make everything better. And I also want to share on what Bobby said. It was maybe an interesting coincidence, or it was an act of God that I was in that space, that place, that time, because I got the call on Tuesday and in the invitation to be in the Bahamas on Friday.
Oh.
and I had to cancel 3 meetings. I had to tell people that I couldn't go to a graduation event. But I made the decision that this was more important to me to spend the 3 days with my son than any meeting or any social gathering or whatever. And somebody wanted me to be there. You know what I mean?
That's
And
incredible.
Absolutely.
it was awesome. And I'm very thankful.
Yeah. Well, we're very thankful for you, Jamie, and this time we had. And again, thank you for your heart and your willingness to share today on Time for Forgiveness.
Well, you're welcome. I appreciate being invited. Thank you.
I'm so grateful for Jamie because I think this is a topic we haven't really touched on. And,
Yeah.
As you said, Sean, and Jamie said, 60% of people are going to experience this in one way or the other.
It hit home for me, for sure. I have a son who is so stubborn, and that's the issue that I don't know how to deal with. Maybe, somebody watching or listening can help me with personally because, look, I'm vulnerable. I'll put myself out there and say, I have tried everything to get through to this young man who has his life, from a divorced family, a broken family, I guess if you want to call it that. But I was always there. And there's been a separation that he's just angry. And I've reached out, and I keep getting my hand slapped. And and I'll reach out every day, and I'll continue to reach out. But at what point do I need to forgive myself? Where does that play into?
Have you forgiven yourself?
I have.
Have you?
Honest to goodness, I have. I believe that I've reached out and done everything I can. And I'm going to continue to do that, especially with my oldest son's wedding coming up. He's going to be there with his new girl, and it's going to be a very interesting dynamic, to see how that all plays out. But I'm here for my son. I'm here for my kids, my daughters. I'm always there. I have an open communication with my 2 daughters, one who lives with us finishing her nursing degree, one who lives in California. We talk daily and communicate, like Jamie was saying, to text, to get those instant messages back. Dad, I'll call you later. Or she calls and I'll leave a message for her real quick if we're doing something like in a studio. So there's just 3 out of 4,
Have any of these reach outs been in person, or are you is it a phone call?
It's a phone call, it's a text, and it's.
Because I think that's easy just to go, I'm not dealing with this, and I'm not going to respond. I'm not going to take this call. I'm not going to text back. But when you are eyeball to eyeball, face to face,
yeah.
I would be really curious about the interaction.
I'm glad you said the summit that you went to with RJ and with Jamie and his son. And when you told me the story, I immediately said, okay, I'm going to call him and say, where do I go? Where can I sign up? I'll do anything at this point because I want his life. I want to live his life with him.
See, that's cool.
Do
I
life
go
together.
Back. Yeah.
Do life
I
together.
want to do life together.
Right.
We'll see.
Well, you're going to have to give us an update.
I'll keep you in the loop. Absolutely.
We want to know. I think that the thing that, and I keep saying the word echo, but it keeps echoing in my mind, is the word act. We all have to act. And sometimes we don't want to act. Sometimes we don't even feel we're the person that has to. But I even go back to the podcast with Matthew West. Run the race. Be the first to say you're sorry.
I've been
practicing, and I've been given more opportunities to practice than I want to. But it is now kind of with intention. Now I want to be the first to say I'm sorry. So.
I am so happy that we do this show because I learned so much about, you guys. I'm sure you'll learn a lot about me because we put it out there. And every guest has something special for someone. And every guest can make a difference in someone's life. And that's why I'm so proud of this show. And that's why I love our workbook. I love everything we're doing. We're working towards the summit. And we're growing. I mean, every day. I mean, we've talked about this off the air, how our relationships with other people, with each other, with our children have changed. So I just love that.
I do too.
Yeah. I was really impressed with Jamie from the standpoint that he didn't let that moment go by because he could have. Like he said, Tommy had already moved in a different direction.
Yeah.
And he, as you said, he had the courage to act in front of all those people.
But you know how we talk about on the show that it's for you, it's personal, and I know it was for Jamie, but look at the impact it's also now in his son's life and how his son now is experiencing relationships differently because he acted.
Right. Well, even with RJ, there were things that he brought up in that on that weekend that I wasn't aware of, and then there were probably things that I mentioned that he wasn't aware of. But it certainly deepened our bond together.
Yeah.
Because anytime you can be vulnerable in front of your son or your daughter, it just instantaneously, I think the walls kind of fall off. They drift away, and then they can see it's what's really in here. And that's, Sean, I think, continue to show that what's in here to your son.
Yeah.
And
Doesn't matter how many
offering that.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how many radio stations I've been on. Doesn't matter, how many people I've been in front of or who I know. Or it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What matters is I'm your dad, and I have not stopped loving you ever. Jamie Cord, thank you for this journey. Thank you so much for listening and for watching Time for Forgiveness. Hey, listen, visit our website at timeforforgiveness.org. And here's the great news. You can now download our workbook. Just click on the QR code. It's that simple. You can also message us on our website because we read every single message, and we certainly love to help. You can also reach us on our socials on Instagram and Facebook, and you can email us, again, at info@timeforforgiveness.org. I'm Sean Parr for Bob and Kelly Pascuzzi. We'll see you next time on Time for Forgiveness.